class. Today we will start with our new subject, that is botany. So before beginning with the lesson, let me give you a small introduction about biology. Okay, before knowing what is botany, you must know what is biology. Okay, so biology, the word biology is taken from two words, that is bios and the second is logos or logy. Okay, so the meaning of bios is life, and coming to the meaning of logos or logy, it is the study. Not only in biology, wherever you go, the word logy will refers to study only. So here bios is life and logos or logy is study. So here the complete definition or complete meaning of biology is study of life. So up to your 10th standard you might have learned biology, right? But now from your intermediate, the biology will be split into two branches, two main branches. The first one will be botany and the second one is the zoology. Coming to botany, it is the study of plants. It is a branch of science that will deal with the study of plants. And coming to zoology, it is a branch of science that will deal with the study of animals. Now here our subject is botany. So we will go in detail about botany. So before beginning with our syllabus or lesson, let me tell you one main point that you need to remember in your life. That is, each and every subject will be having some father, that is the person who have discovered that subject, who have studied that subject for the first time. Okay, so like that the father of biology is Aristotle, and coming to botany, the father of botany is Theophrastus. So Theophrastus is the person who have studied the botany for the first time. And coming to zoology, here again the father of zoology is Aristotle. This was a small introduction about our subject, right? Now let us proceed towards our syllabus. Our book of NCERT consists of 7 units altogether. Okay, so from that today we are going to start with our first unit, that is the diversity in the living world. Diversity means variations, right, in the living world. Why here living world is coming? Because the science, biology is the subject that only deals with the living forms. Okay, so here the first unit is diversity in the living world, and from that today we are going to learn our first subunit, that is the living world. Okay, the introduction, we can say the characters of life, the diversities and etc. So let us begin with that. So before beginning with our lesson, let us have a small introduction about the topics that we are going to cover in this lesson. Okay, so in this lesson we are going to deal with the introduction of the living organisms. What are living organisms? Or we can say when an organism can be considered as living. Okay, and the second thing that we are going to deal in this lesson is characteristics of life. And then comes the third point that we are going to cover, that is diversity in life, variations, as I have told you earlier, because on our earth various kinds of organisms are surviving, right? So that will be considered as the diversity, the variations. Now coming to the fourth point that we have to cover is binomial nomenclature. Nomenclature is nothing but naming of organisms, and coming to the binomial, it is a process in which two names will be given. That is, for example, you can take in human beings also we will be having two names most oftenly. That is, one will be the initial and the other will be the surname, right? So like that only organisms like plants and animals are also given two names. That is why it is called as binomial nomenclature. So in detail we are going to learn it later. Now let us proceed towards the other thing that we have to cover in this lesson, that is classification. That is the classification of organisms based on their qualities, right, based on their characters, which family they belong to, which species they belong to, and etc. That is the classification. And now let us proceed towards the taxonomic categories. So that is the sixth point that we are going to cover in our lesson, that is taxonomic categories. So these taxonomic categories will be again classified into 7 subtypes. Okay, so what will be the taxonomic categories actually? The first one will be the species, then comes the genus, then the C part is family, and the D one is order, E is class, and part F is phylum, and the last one is the kingdom. So these are the taxonomic categories about which we are going to learn in our lesson. Now comes the seventh and the last topic that we are going to cover in our lesson, that is taxonomic aids. So Let us recall all the things again. As I have told you, in our class we are going to learn our first lesson from unit 1, that is the living world, right? So in this we are going to cover all together 7 topics. The first topic will be introduction, in which we are going to learn about the introduction of the living organisms. What are living organisms, or we can say when an organism can be considered as living. Okay, and coming to the second point that need to be covered is characteristics of life. What are the different characters of a living organism? Then the third part that we are going to cover is diversity in life, the variations, the diversities in the living forms. And the fourth one will be the binomial nomenclature, that is the naming of the organisms, that will be having 2 names most probably. Now the next one will be the classification, okay, based on their characters and qualities. And then we will be proceeding towards the taxonomic categories, that will be subdivided into 7 parts, that is species, genus, family, order, class, phylum and kingdom. And the last but not the least thing will be the taxonomic aids. So I hope you all got the clear idea about our introduction part. Now let us proceed towards the first part, that is introduction. So as I have told you, in our introduction part, we are going to learn about the introduction of life, right? What is living actually? When an organism can be considered as a living one, right? So what according to you is living? Living is something that is alive, right? In our easy words, we can say that living is something that is alive, something that can grow, right? That is a common answer given by most of the students. That is, living is something that can grow, move, reproduce, respire and carry out various cellular activities, right? That is the most easiest definition of living, right? An organism that can grow, move from one place to another place, or reproduce, respire and carry out various cellular activities can be considered as the living one. To understand what is living, we need to look into the features of the living things in detail. But let me tell you one thing, the definition that we have discussed just now is not the exact definition of the living form, okay? So to understand living in the broader sense, we need to look into the features, right? The characteristics of life. Then only we will get the clear idea about the definition of living. So as I have told you, now we will be proceeding towards the characteristics of living organisms. Based on that only we can conclude whether the organism is in the living form or in the non-living form. So now let us proceed towards the characteristics of living organisms. So there are various characters of a life form, okay? So let us proceed towards it. The first characteristics of living organism is growth. We usually consider an organism to be living when it is able to grow, right? So here the first character of the living organism is growth, and the second one will be the reproduction, and the third character will be the ability to sense the environment. And coming to the fourth character, that is metabolism, and the fifth character is consciousness. So these are considered as the major characteristics of the living organisms. But to find out whether they are really the characters of living organisms or not, we have to learn about them in detail. Now let us proceed towards our first point, that is about the growth. Let us find out whether an organism is completely dependent on growth or not. Let us try to find out whether the growth is the definite character of living organisms or not. So to conclude that, we must be knowing the definition of growth actually. What is growth? Growth is usually defined by the increase in mass and number of individual organisms, okay? That is an increase in mass and number of individual organisms. That will be the exact definition of growth. So humans visibly grow up to a certain age, but the cells in the body keep on replacing the old ones. So here a small point have been given, that is human beings, right? Visibly, that is visibly grow means we can see them growing up to a certain age only, but the cells inside their body will be continuously replacing till the end of their life, right? So some of the non-living things also seem to grow in size due to the accumulation of particles. For example, the growth of a mountain, right? So the growth, it is there in living as well as non-living forms, because in human beings, animal, plants, etc., we can easily see them growing. But coming to the non-living things, for example mountains, they will also grow because of the accumulation of some materials, deposition of some minerals in that, right? So they will also grow in size. So hence we cannot consider that growth as the defining character of the living organisms. We cannot say that living organism is completely dependent on growth. We cannot consider growth to be the definite and the exact character of the living organism, because it can also be seen in non-living things, for example mountains. So that was all about the growth, right, in which we can conclude that it is not the definite character of living organisms. We can say that it is a character, it is one of the characters of the living beings, but it is not the only one character of the living beings, we can say. Now let us proceed towards the second one, that is reproduction. So what is reproduction? It is a process by which an organism produces an individual like its own, right? The process of reproducing or giving birth, we can say, right? So but we cannot say that all living organisms are able to reproduce. How? Because there will be many organisms, for example sterile worker bees, infertile human beings or mules, etc. are not capable of reproducing. So what it is saying here, we all know the definition of reproduction, right? That is the process in which parents will give birth to the young ones or the progeny will be extended, right? So but we cannot say that reproduction is also the definite character of living organisms. Why? Means in living organisms also there are many living organisms who are unable to reproduce. For example, you can take as mules, right, and the sterile worker bees, they are unable to reproduce. And in broader way, if we go, infertile human couples will be there who will be unable to give birth to young ones, right? So we cannot say that they are not the living organisms, but we can conclude that reproduction is not the definite character of the living organism. It is not the definite character of the living things. Then comes the ability to sense the environment. All living organisms have the ability to sense their surroundings or environment, right? This response to environmental stimuli is called as irritability, right? The ability of the living organisms to sense the environment, right, will be considered as the irritability. So how we are going to sense our environment? By using our sense organs, right? From eyes we are able to see, from nose we are going to smell, right? From tongue we are going to taste, right? From hands or skin we can see, we are able to feel the touch. From ears we are able to hear. So we are using our sense organs to sense our environment. And on the other hand, plants do respond to external factors like light, water, temperature, other organisms, pollutants and etc. Hence we can conclude that ability to sense the environment is one of the definite character of the living organisms, because no non-living organism will be having the ability to sense the environment. So it is the characteristic that is only reserved for the living beings. Hence we can conclude that it is the definite character of the living organisms. Now let us proceed towards the next one, that is metabolism. Let us check whether it is a definite character of living beings or not. So what is metabolism actually? It comprises all the chemical reactions going inside a living cell or body, right? The chemical reactions. For example, the breakdown of the complex molecules to the simpler ones in the process of digestion, right? We can take it as a best example. So it only occurs in the living beings, right? All the chemical reactions will only take place inside the living organisms, but we cannot say that it is also taking place in the non-living things also. That is what the reason it is also considered as one of the definite characters of the living beings, right? So till now we have covered two definite characters of living things. Now let us proceed towards the next one, that is consciousness. Let us check whether it comes under the definite characters category or indefinite characters category. So what is consciousness? It is the property by which an organism reacts to an external stimulus or change in environment, right? Just take a small example. If someone pinch you, immediately you will get the response from your mind, right? That will be called as consciousness. It means that you are conscious, right? It is a typical property of living organisms. It is also a typical and definite property of the living organisms, because if we go and touch the non-living thing, right? If we beat a chair, will it feel it? No, right? Sorry. Will that feel it? No, because it don't have the consciousness inside it. But if you go and slap a human being or an animal, it will immediately attack you, because it is having self-consciousness, we can say. It is having consciousness inside the body. And one more note that you have to remember is, human being is only one who is aware of himself, that is, has self-consciousness. No other organism have self-consciousness. They only have consciousness. I hope you are getting the clear idea and the difference between the consciousness and self-consciousness. And human beings are the only organisms that will be self-conscious, that will be aware of themselves. Other organisms like plants and animals does not have that much of consciousness level, but consciousness can be concluded as the definite character of the living beings only. So that was all about the characteristics of living organisms. I hope you all have got the clear idea about the introduction of life forms and the characteristics of the living organisms. Now we are going to proceed towards the third thing, that is diversity in the living world. We see a large variety of living organisms around us, right? Like potted plants, insects, birds, pets or other animals and plants, right? So we are able to see it with our naked eye. Different kinds of creatures are surviving around us, like plants, animals, insects, birds, human beings obviously, and etc. There are also several organisms that we cannot see with our naked eye, but they are all around us, right? There are certain organisms, for example microorganisms, the bacteria. We are unable to see it with our naked eye, but we cannot say that they don't exist in the environment, right? We have to accept their existence and they also survive with us. So if we increase the area that we make observations, the range and variety of organisms would also increase. If we are going to study in broader way, if we are going to increase the area of our observation, then we will come to know that the number of organisms or the variety of organisms have also been increased. If we visit a dense forest, we would probably see a much greater number and kinds of living organisms in it. So if we just enter a dense forest, we are going to find n number of new creatures that we are unaware till the date. This refers to biodiversity, or the number and types of organisms present on earth. So that is the diversity in the living world. That is, we can say that in our surroundings we can find n number of organisms, living organisms like plants, animals, birds, human beings, insects and etc. So it is a kind of diversity that we are able to see in the living world, different creatures living together inside the world, in the environment, right? So that is called as biodiversity. So that was all about the diversity. Now let us proceed towards the nomenclature. As we have discussed in the beginning of our class that nomenclature refers to the naming of organisms, okay? The naming that will be given to the organisms will be considered as nomenclature. We know the plants and animals in our own area by their local names, right? In our localities, in our local areas, we call the plants by their local names. But these local names would vary from place to place, even within a country. Right? Agree or not? These plants will be having different names in different places. Such situation will lead to a lot of confusion. Hence, there is a need to standardize the naming of living organisms such that a particular organism is known by the same name all over the world. So, why the nomenclature will be given? Why the naming of the organisms will be done? Because we will call the plants by different names in different localities. So, it will definitely create lot of confusion. So if we have a standardized name, right, that will be easy for us to identify a plant in the whole world. Thus nomenclature is providing a scientific name to an identified organism. So to make a clarity, to bring a clarity in the naming of plants and animals or organisms, we can say nomenclature is providing scientific names that will be common in all over the world. Wherever you go, you will have the same name for a same plant. So now in plants, scientific names are based on agreed principle and criteria which are provided in International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. So in plants, right, as we are learning about botany, we should have a clear idea about plants, right? So in plants, scientific names will be based on agreed principles. Certain principles have been used in naming the names, and there is a criteria that have to be followed in naming a plant, right, which are provided in International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, that is ICBN. Please do remember this because it is very important for your IPE as well as NEET. Okay, that is ICBN, International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. It is a set of principles, right, for naming the plants, for nomenclature we can say. The scientific name ensures that each organism has only one name, right? That's a major function of the scientific name. And they also ensure that such a name has not been used for any other organism. Suppose if we are calling the mango as Mangifera indica, and if we call the neem also by the same name, then it will again create lot of confusion. That is what the reason it is a work of the nomenclature, right, to make sure, to ensure that each organism has only one name and to also ensure that such name has not been used by any other organism. Now let us proceed towards the binomial nomenclature. It is very important for you for the study, so please have a clear idea about this. So please concentrate here. Biologists follow universally accepted principles to provide scientific names to known organisms. As we have discussed earlier, for plants they will follow the criteria and principles that have been described in ICBN, that is International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, right? Each name has two components. The first one will be the generic name and the second will be the specific epithet. Please do remember this. The first name will be the generic name or genus name and the second will be the specific epithet or the species name, we can say. The way in which the plants are named, right? This system of providing a name with two components is called as binomial nomenclature. So as we are using two components in naming a single organism, right? It will be called as binomial nomenclature. Binomial means two names, having two names, and nomenclature in the sense naming of the organism. So as we are using two criteria in this, it is referred to as binomial nomenclature. This system of naming the organisms based on binomial nomenclature is given by a great biologist whose name was Carolus Linnaeus. Please try to remember his name. So now to understand binomial nomenclature in detail, let us take an example of mango, okay, so that you can understand it better. So, the scientific name of mango is Mangifera indica. So, here the first word, that is Mangifera, is a generic name or a genus name, we can say, and indica is the specific epithet or the species name. So, I hope you all have got the clear idea how to write the names of the organisms based on the rules of the binomial nomenclature. Now let us have a look on the universal rules of nomenclature, the rules that have to be followed while naming the organisms. Biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. So these names will be generally taken from the Latin language, and there is one rule that it will always be written in italics, not in the bold form. The first word in a biological name represents the genus, while the second denotes the specific epithet. As we have discussed earlier, the first name in the biological name or the scientific name will be considered as the generic or genus name, and the second name is the specific epithet. Both the words in a biological name when handwritten, right, are separately underlined or printed in italics to indicate their Latin origin. So you can see it clearly that I have underlined two words separately, right? I would have also written like this, right? But this is the wrong method of writing a scientific name. The correct method is this one, where we are going to underline these two words separately. So it is the rule, universal rule to write a scientific name. And the first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter. You can see it clearly, and the specific epithet will be always beginning with this small letter, right? I hope you all are getting the clear idea. Here I have written both the words in the capital form. That is completely wrong, but here I have used small letter in the beginning of the specific epithet. This is the way you are going to name an organism, where you are going to start the generic name with a capital letter, you are going to start the specific epithet with a small letter, and you are going to print it in the italic forms, or when handwritten you have to underline these two words separately. Name of the author appears after the specific epithet in an abbreviated form. So always you should try to remember the name of the author or the person who have first studied that plant, right, so that you can use it in your scientific name, and the name of that author will be always written at the end of the specific epithet in the abbreviated form, that is in short form. For example, the Mangifera indica was first discovered or studied by Linnaeus, that is Carolus Linnaeus, okay. So here we can add his name in the abbreviated form like this, Lin we have to write. So it means that this plant Mangifera indica was first studied or observed by Carolus Linnaeus. It indicates that this species was first described by Linnaeus, we can say. So this is the way you are going to name the living organisms based on the universal rules of the nomenclature, that is the universal rules of binomial nomenclature. So that was all about the binomial nomenclature, and today let us stop it here itself. So before ending our class, let us recall the topics that we have covered today is the introduction to biology, the subject, then the introduction of life, then characteristics of life, diversity in life, and the last but not the least was the binomial nomenclature. I hope you all have understood the whole thing, right? And in our next class, we are going to learn about the classification, taxonomy, and taxonomic categories and taxonomic aids. Okay, I hope you all have understood the concept very well. Let us meet in our next class. Thank you.